joining me, man.
It's like nothing ever happened.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's
you mean the markets?
Trump doesn't know what he's doing. The world's doomed. He's sitting on his golden toilet, bloviating, and now we're back to highs.
It's quite amazing. And I was reading, some of the financial press this morning, and they're trying to explain that, and they're just like tied in knots trying to explain it, but don't give Trump any credit. It's fun to watch.
No, it's I was looking this weekend, and Tom Friedman, the New York Times guy, Thomas Friedman, I think his name is, he was saying that, he hoped that Trump and Netanyahu wouldn't get any credit for this and wouldn't get their way. And I'm like, everyone's got a stake in this, whether they like it or not. You want to at least win it. And then we can hash all that other stuff out,
That is so true, because, a lot of these influencers, and we've steadfastly not gone down this route, but a lot of people got on the, okay, Trump's doing wrong in the war, therefore we want him to fail, and the U.S. will fail, and the world is ending, and, let's all vote in Kamala. I didn't get on that train, but how do they get off that train, man? How do they get off now?
Well, I don't think once you get TDS, it goes away very easily. You need some serious therapy. I mean, I think initially a lot of these influencers started saying, this is another war on, just for Israel. And I think, one thing that's happened to the markets is they've started piecing together, I think, what's probably happening for real, which is there's a much bigger picture here. And this is about, Trump pushing back on the Chinese empire, which was, taking over the Panama Canal, controlling Venezuela, controlling Cuba, creating these proxies that were thorns in our side in all these regions, backing Iran. And, the Chinese were then coming to us saying, we're not going to sell you rare earth stuff, and we're not going to worry about the IP theft, and we're going to continue to dump. And I think,
and continue to push the fentanyl and kill 100 kids.
Yeah, correct. We can't, and we couldn't really do anything because, they're so strategically important for production and industry, and we get so many components from them. They're such a big part of the supply chain that we couldn't really push back too hard. And so when Trump tried to do the tariffs, it hurt people, it hurt businesses in the US, fair enough, but that was his, his stick. And I think, when that got shut down, he's thinking, and I think the whole time I have this feeling that this is a major theme that they're not going to talk about, but it is to try and check China's, mercantilism and control over our country. And, we've talked about this before, but, inadvertently, Trump's actions probably have woken up a lot of countries to maybe we don't want to rely completely on Iran and the Straits of Hormuz for our fertilizer, for our helium, for our gas, all this stuff. Maybe we want to look into this ourselves, and that could have saved a lot of time and lives potentially, because we're dealing with it now. And I think it's much better to do it when you have a really strong military and you have the technology like we're doing it, than to wait to a point where, everything's on the line and you've got no protection otherwise,
Yeah. I just got a text that the show's not streaming on CDM. I think I don't know. We're getting some weird stuff happening, man. I mean, we're getting attacked left and right. I'll deal with that. Just for everybody who's watching, we'll put it out on CDM again via another way. In fact, while you're talking, Tom, let's move in. I'll deal with that in a second. But Russia, Russia is getting a lot out of this, and they're going. China's held the upper hand over Russia. Just because Russia needed to sell over the last decade, and they some really low price deals with China. Now that may be flipping, because Russia's saying, okay, you've shut off Iran, we can supply your oil, but probably not going to be at a rock bottom price. What do you think?
I think part of what's going on also, and I think that's probably true, and I think part of what's going on is pulling Russia out of the China sphere. I think Russia's interests are more aligned with ours long term, with the US. I think they could be a very good trading partner for, a lot of the, natural resources that we need. And I think that, through this whole thing, I think there's two countries I think that are in the best condition, and it's the US and Russia, because we have energy independence. Russia is energy dependent for their economy. They need to
Mm-hmm.
sell energy. And hopefully this conflict will force Europe to come to a close with Ukraine and to move on. You don't want to
Yeah.
just, have all your eggs in one basket. And it's going to take Europe years to develop, an energy production, and they're all sitting on natural gas. France has it, Germany has it, Poland has it, the UK clearly has it. Trump was putting on Truth Social about, how the UK is like got the lion's share of the oil. They're just not doing it. And I think, hopefully this has woken up a lot of, not like, ideologically like trapped people, and they realize that this is the energy situation with gas and fossil fuels is too important to just move away from in the short term.
Let me just jump in. Amy, if you're listening, you say it's not streaming on CDM. I see it on CDM Rumble, but are you talking X? Just send me a text. Back to you, Tom. Routes and resources: Panama Canal, Strait of Malacca, Strait of Hormuz. I mean, go down the list. That's what is being,
Yes, it
cornered right
changes
now.
the balance of power between China and the US, clearly, right?
Yeah.
They don't have crude. They need to bring it in, and to the extent that we're controlling the seas, which we should be because we are the dominant superpower here,
Mm-hmm.
I think it kind of forces them to trade more fairly. And that's what he tried to do with tariffs, and then the Supreme Court shot that down. And now it's more of a kind of, we have a stick, we're going to use it. And I think he's been very, everyone says like Trump says all these crazy things. He's been very, I think, forward with China and like, listen, we want to trade with you. We don't want to disrupt this. We don't want to
Yeah.
keep this from you, but you're going to have to help out here. And for me, I think one of the big things about this blockade that hopefully will work is that
Mm-hmm.
it forces China's got a lot of storage, so they're like there's no impending like calamity, but they need to push Iran to get rid of the nuclear the nuclear materials they have, and to play ball. And at the end of the day, this is like a normal conversation, right? They
Mm-hmm.
are a regional bully. Every time there is a problem with Iran, they block the most important trading route in the world
Yeah.
every time. So like
Yeah.
we can't continue with this sort of level of, kind of piracy, and we have to push back against it. So the things we're asking for are are not ridiculous. It may be if you're one of the mullahs, yeah, sorry, but we don't want Iran to have nuclear capabilities. And we also don't want this to continue in the world. And I don't think any of the other Gulf states want it either. They don't
Definitely.
want Iran lobbing missiles at their storage facilities and their production facilities.
That's really brought out that whole dynamic. This whole conflict is really exposed. A lot of people say Trump does things to expose things and make people see things. Maybe that's what's going on here in some extent. I'm sure there's multiple agendas happening here,
Yeah,
but
yeah, correct.
but the Gulf has definitely been exposed as really vulnerable to Iranian missiles.
Yeah,
That's a thing.
yeah.
That's a
And
thing
that
now.
should not
Yeah.
happen again. And if we can, and
Yeah.
that's like, a lot of people are talking about choke points. Well, look at the choke points, right? They're being eliminated one by one. And it's not just benefiting like on that scale Israel, it's benefiting the other Gulf states in the region. And if you go back to that speech Trump gave, I think while he was in Saudi Arabia, about the future and how they were going to be in control of their own destiny, all of these countries have been sort of under the empires of Europe or the US forever and not really been independent, and they've been kept at war with one another. I think they all sort of want to break away from that. They
Yeah.
want progress and prosperity. And I think the way of doing that is to take this legacy, chaos creator in the region,
Mm-hmm.
and and you know clip them back so that they don't have the power they did, take their nuclear stuff away, take their uranium or plutonium or whatever they have away from them, and push forward in more of a kind of like, we're going to all work together regionally. And that's a huge stability for the global economy. It's great for Asia. It's pretty much in everyone's interest to have this resolved, because a prosperous region will be good for every country. It'll be good for energy prices. We all need them. We all know that AI is going to be a big driver. The world is short energy right now, and we just can't have these kind of like choke points.
So well said. You have the Saudis now pushing pipelines over to the Red Sea, and that's going to be a thing. Maybe this will lessen the world's dependence on that choke point.
Yeah. Well, these kind of things wake people up, and so I think there's these guys, the Saudis and the Qataris and the Omanis and Emirates guys, they all have the ability to have workers like 24/7 build these things. And I think after this, it's like, this is about waking the world up in a controlled way of, listen, you don't want your eggs in one basket. You need to diversify. You need to protect yourself. And hopefully this will happen and it will stabilize energy prices. And there's a lot of conspiracy people out there that think it's been set up like this on purpose, right?
Yeah.
And that may be true. I have no idea. But clearly, if people wake up and they're like, we're going to have to invest more in our energy infrastructure, and Europe wakes up and says, maybe we start using some of this gas. Maybe we stop. I know this is this is really upsetting the WEF crowd and the New World Order people, but sorry, you got to look after your people.
Well, I sensed a blood in the water kind of moment last week when the media, the World Economic Forum, the European globalists, the influencers here all thought they had Trump. They thought, okay, we got him.
Yeah.
I mean, and so, I don't think that's true. I think now they're waking up and saying, well, maybe not.
Well, when the UK and France want to like swoop in at the end for some sort of like negotiation, that it's they're just trying to get the trophy, the participation trophy.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I think that's definitely true. And I think that this has been. I was telling somebody last night. This has been like the war. Like, if you think about it, there haven't been leaks.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. Like, we haven't had the leaks that we had in the past. Like, oh, so-and-so said this. There's been very little of that. So he's running a tight ship, with his cabinet, with all this stuff. So that's I think a very good thing. But secondly, like, people just have had no idea what's going on there. Right. Yeah. So everybody's like, they can't continue to talk about, like, I get it. Iran's got 90 million people or whatever, and they're very powerful military, but we've also taken out like the majority of their leadership.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like, that's not a loss, no matter how you look at it. And at some point, if we can continue doing that without boots on the ground, I think that's a huge deal.
It is a huge deal.
Yeah.
There's also this whole thing that, Trump is actually working for, Satan, and he's going to like starve the world and it's famine is coming because he's shutting down all the choke points for fertilizer and all that. I mean, what do you say to that?
Absurd.
Yeah.
Absurd. I mean, a lot of this stuff, you can't immediately replace it, right?
Yeah.
But it's not completely shut down either, right? Yeah. So like, it'll come back in the market, and I get it. I've heard that Africa's going to have a tough planting season, all this stuff, but this was an inevitability. Like, what would have happened if Iran would have decided that they were going to attack, Israel, for example, at some stage? It would be even worse. So this is kind of letting the pressure valve go before that ever happens. And it's a controlled like detonation kind of thing,
Yeah.
Your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
A warm welcome here at the National Press Club. Welcome to the journalists, welcome to the Embraer team, and welcome to the other guests that we have here. We're going to announce, and as some of you guessed it right when they came in, the first E2 order by an American operator. And that operator is Avello. We believe this is really a strategic shift to unlock profitability for the customer. I'm very pleased that we have Andrew Levy here as the CEO of Avello, and I'm very pleased to give the stage to share a little bit more about what Avello is going to do with the E2 195. Thank you very much.
Couldn't be more excited to be here as part of this historic announcement. We have such a great cultural fit as companies, so we're very, very excited to be Embraer's newest customer. We launched our airline in April of 21, and our target is focusing on small secondary airports of large metro areas. We've carried over 8 million customers since we started on 63,000 flights. And we've done all these things with 1,200 of the greatest crew members I could ever imagine having, and many of them are here with me today. This is the right airplane for us. It's going to open up opportunities for us that no other aircraft can serve. The best thing about the airplane, of course, is you will not find a middle seat on this airplane. It doesn't exist. We won't have any to offer. It's going to be the best cabin in the United States, and we're so excited about that. This is going to elevate our experience to the highest level, and we think our customers are absolutely going to love the airplane.
What about the CFTC is investigating allegedly all these front-running trades? What have you heard anything on that? I mean, it's obvious.
I mean, a
right?
lot of people have speculated that, you know, it's Trump, it's Barron Trump, it's you know, whatever. I mean, I think that's absurd. I think it's like, to be honest with you, I wonder sometimes myself if this is how like dark ops are funded, right?
Yeah, yeah.
If like there are people in the know in the intelligence agencies and they're like, we know this is going to happen. We need some money for, you know, like, you know, transvestite pygmy somewhere. So, you know, this is how we're going to get it, you know.
And Tulsi dropped the Eric Tramanella, or however you say his name, yesterday. She referred him to DOJ for prosecution for the Russia hoax. Did you see that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like the least surprise I've had all week. You know, like that guy was a bad guy from the beginning.
Well, my point is, like, maybe they're starting to, because it's I see this as a clans. They're fighting. It's gangs of New York. They're like,
yes,
criminal gangs are fighting for control inside the power structure. And, you know, it seemed like the dark side was winning over the Empire Struck Back over the last few weeks, but I feel it shifting the other way a little bit.
I 100% agree with you. I mean, I think that there's a number of things going on. Like when Trump does stuff, and I don't think it's like 5D chess, but I think he tends to look at like the outcomes and how that can spread to other things. Like, so if I do this and I get rid of the nuclear, you know, materials that Iran has, I make the region safer. And at the same time, if I get control of the Straits of Hormuz, I put China in a position that they're going to have to deal with me. And that's like killing 2-3 birds with one stone. And I think he thinks of things like that. So when he gets that momentum, they probably have a lot of this stuff and they know a lot of this stuff about these bad players. It's the same thing with like the Swalwell stuff and a lot of this stuff, you know, a lot of these things are starting to come out now. I think they're going to be released going into the midterms, and I think they probably waited longer to do that. I think that we're going to get more information on elections. We're going to get more information about the bad actors, the people who broke the law, who were conspiring to, you know, have a coup. I think we did probably have a coup in 2020, if I'm honest. And I think a lot of these people will be exposed moving into the midterms in a very controlled, you know, manner so that they can control the news cycles.
So the CEO of OpenAI, what's his name? I'm spacing on his name right now. I should know that, but he said that AI is definitely going to,
Sam Altman.
Yeah. He said AI is definitely going to create on its own bioweapons going forward that are new creations. Have you heard that? I mean, he's dropping bombs like there's going to be a cyber attack. There's going to be bioweapons. Is he like creating it or forcing it or pushing it, or what do you think?
First of all, he's probably the guy that is the most, like, I don't know how to put this. He's the most worrying person in that space to me personally.
Concerning person. Yeah.
I think, if you look at his past, if you look at some of the allegations against him, it concerns me, right? That this guy is in charge of OpenAI. The way he does business, the things he says, the lies he tells, all this stuff. I'm sure there's I don't think that we have to worry about that today. Eventually it could. And, like along that same line, one thing that was really concerning to me is that Ukraine was talking about robots in the battlefield as opposed to humans. Well, the thing about humans running the military is that if you go tell your army to kill a bunch of civilians, they're going to say no way, because they come from these families, right? So like at some point the army says, no, Moss, I'm not doing this. And the government falls apart if it's completely, totalitarian or whatever. When you have robots, that changes that equation. They're just going to do what they're told, and it doesn't matter. They're not thinking. They're not sentient. They have no skin in the game. So that really scares me. And I think that's one thing that AI has the potential to be that is very concerning. It's like, I don't want AI to make determinations about what rights humans should have, or whether human life is valuable at some point or other. And that sort of feeds into what you're saying. I mean, I don't want AI making weapons like that, bioweapons. And I think, but maybe Altman's angle is he's being like sort of lapped a little bit, I think, with some of the other AIs with the, what is it?
Claude.
Well, Claude is part of it.
Anthropic.
Anthropic. Yeah, that's it. I argue with Claude all day long, so I should know that. But I think some of these other AIs are surpassing it, and I think maybe he's trying to like spook everyone so he can kind of regroup and get control and use a political angle to it. I just don't trust anything that guy says, frankly.
If you go back to, I think all of this stuff we've had over the last several decades is predictive programming. You look at Star Trek, like Spock talking to the computer. You look at, iRobot.
Star Wars. It's all like, it's all right here, right now. I mean,
iRobot, the old Isaac Asimov, the three, what was it? The golden rule for robots, humans are always right. Something like that. Don't harm the humans. I mean, dude, that's like, were these guys time travelers or what?
Yeah.
I mean,
either that or that was like our model for like, sort of unconsciously how we saw the future, and we've always worked towards that, right? That became a template.
You look at Terminator, you look at, there was, I forget which, it was a book or something, and the book is, it talks about how the AI took over, and they said, well, they gave the US bomber fleet AI control, and then the AI just said, okay, we're going to kill the humans with the bombers or something like that, so it's a real problem, man.
I think that's something that we have to be extremely attentive to. I think, like forever, machine versus man has been a thing, right? And people have always been either afraid of being replaced in one way or another by machines, whether it's just like, on farms or, like at the very basic level, like miners and things like this. And I think that feeds into kind of all this feeds into that fear. And, I think that we clearly have to have rules of the road, and I don't want to hear in a decade's time that AI has rights too, right? Like, and I have this conversation with a lot of friends, and they're like, you can get to this philosophical level and ask these questions about like, what is sentient and what is not. And I don't want to hear that like AI has rights, because that's just not the case. And I think, the more self-loathing half of our population needs to like not have a say in this, because I think AI is AI, and it has to be able to, you have to have a kill switch immediately so that these things don't happen. And I think that every one of these AI companies has to have that. And that should be something the government, sort of agrees to. And I think we really have to monitor this stuff. But, for me, I think AI overall is going to be much greater force of good than evil. And I think the evil part of it is humans allowing it to start making its own decisions and not work for us.
That's what the internet has done. I mean, you've seen a thing that could be and was very beneficial for humanity. I mean, it saw freedom spread because of the internet. And then now they are trying to shut that down because they see that as a threat. It could be the same thing with AI, and they're trying to control it and censor it. I mean, Europe's a joke, but you also could see AI do that, where it was made to be very helpful to humanity and expose, like the Doge, for instance, all the corruption was found because of AI.
Correct.
But they're trying to use it for. So that's the battle we're in. Good and evil. I guess it's very basic at the end of the day.
Yes, it can definitely be used for that, for either one of those.
Yeah. It's almost a religion, and that's the place of religion, right? If you take religion out, then you have no morality and you have nobody, trying to control this in a good way.
Well, if you compromise its values with woke religion, yes, it's going to invariably be bad, because it's going to put humans against humans based on their race, based on, things. And during the Biden administration, this is something they were trying to do. They were trying to teach AI to be woke and to value humans differently based on their race, or, and this, I think this stuff this leads to a very evil place.
So we have a comment. We can't even enforce the Constitution. How are we going to enforce AI rules? Laugh out loud.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I think that, I think we have to put our faith in the Supreme Court on that one. And that's as good as we can do. But, I certainly think that it would be better led by the Trump administration on making sure that AI doesn't do these things than some other administration, because I think these guys tend to think of things in a very pro-humanist way.
Agree.
So,
all right, last issue. I know you got to go. AI is having trouble in a lot of ways. A lot of pushback on the data centers, a lot of pushback on funding for the data centers. What do you see, just financial market?
I think that's behind us now. I think
really?
I think that's been a fear that has held, like in the last week, a lot of the AI stocks have done a lot better. And I think that, every now and then there's all these scare tactics that people are putting out there, like, oh my God, we're building too many data centers and this is just a waste of time. And, one thing I look at is, if you look at what Google and Google and Meta did to advertising, right? Advertising grows globally. It's sort of like GDP plus. Well, they moved it from one pile to the next pile, right? So it's a value transfer is what it really is. And I think, when people were looking at the valuations for these AI companies in the first point, they were like, how can these things be trading at these like crazy valuations? But AI, and then look at what software's done this year, right? Software's gotten killed. There's been a huge transfer from the value of AI away from software. It's not like both are at all-time highs or something crazy like that, which would be like bubble type stuff. But I think that, there's a valuation thing that's going on right now, and a valuation transfer. And I think part of the fear that AI was overvalued was the data center stuff. And, I know some people who are in the industry, and they're like, I'm like, I want to run OpenClaw on my computer. So what do I do? Well, if I go and try and buy like NVIDIA chips, I'm not going to get them.
Yeah.
They're not available. Right. And the data center stuff, the usage for AI is, I mean, I don't even know what the chart looks like, but it's got to be hyperbolic, right? I mean, it must be going up so much. So like, I think people are starting to get their heads around, like, the data center thing is real and it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, energy is a concern, but there's a lot of companies that are coming up with ways of addressing that. There's like
What about the funding though? Is that being curtailed? Like the funding?
No, I think that's coming back to the table. I think, like Oracle was building like loads of data centers, and their stock got crushed because of it. But now I think it's been, now people are starting to realize that that's going to come through to their earnings, right? And there's going to be like a revenue pile that they're going to get, from those investments. I think that, I think it was Jane Street was just invested like $1 billion in the data center stuff. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I think I heard that. But I think that like, all of this stuff that comes out, you have like this period in markets where people are scared about it and they talk about it and they talk about it, and then nothing happens. And then markets kind of like mean revert to where they were before. And I think, I think the AI stuff now is back in the kind of, yeah, we've heard that, and we don't believe it. So you want to buy AI stocks now, in particular, if this whole thing gets resolved in the Middle East, the helium that was being used by the guys to make chips, to test chips and stuff like that, that's going to be less of a problem. The energy that the oil was providing, that's going to be less of a problem. My personal belief is I think we're going to need everything. We're going to need solar. We're going to need wind. We're going to need coal. We're going to need everything, because the amount of energy we're going to have to, nuclear, the amount of energy we're going to have to produce is going to be like, off the charts, unseen. So I think it's all worth looking at, like, even some of these coal companies.
Also, all this free energy out of space that, Steve Quast and others are talking about, where you can just have phone charge just by having it connected to a satellite.
Well, and not to bring up the conspiracy stuff, but this 0 point energy, there's all these like nuclear guys that are like dying. I heard there's
number 10 came out today. What is that?
Guy or something like that. I'm like, are you serious? Well, what do these guys know?
I'm going to have to ask Hegseth that in the next press brief. I mean, that's a good question.
Yeah, there you go.
Anything you see value in? Last question, I promise, right now.
Well, it's hard for me to say that now that we're back at all-time highs. I think personally, I think that people are underestimating the potential value of what's being done in the world right now for getting rid of these choke points. Like the balance of power between China and the US, if they can stop stealing our IP, if they can stop dumping stuff on us, if we can get some real trade agreements in place with China, now that we've got, an oil thing and them over the barrel, no pun intended. But I think that we can have like a much more prolonged period of growth that's going to come from AI, that's going to come from like the lack of these choke points that already shut things down. And I think the last piece of the puzzle, frankly, is watch what's happening at the Fed, right? If we can get Warsh in there and get Powell out of there, and Powell's being, I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It's like, I might stay till 2028. Well, no,
dude, get out of there.
Sorry, dude, get out of there. And he's a major choke point,
If there's ever any evidence that he's a bad guy, that's it.
Yeah, correct. The guy should just leave. He's disgraced. He should leave.
Yeah, totally agree. Tom, thank you very much. We'll have you back.
Got it.
Appreciate it. Ciao.